All right, welcome back to another episode here at Whiteboard Medicine. We appreciate you checking it out. Today, we are going to continue our shock series, and we're going to be diving into anaphylactic shock. Unfortunately, fairly common-ish type of shock, and one that's very treatable for most patients as long as we recognize it quick and treat it appropriately. So we're going to be diving into anaphylactic shock. We'll talk about what it is, its mechanism, the hallmarks, classic presentation, its triad, pathophysiology, hemodynamics, differentiating features, management principles, and then we'll get into some practice questions as well at the end. So this is going to be a very high-yield discussion on anaphylactic shock, and hopefully y'all can take away a lot from it. Before we dive in, though, we just wanted a quick 30 seconds to share with y'all something we're really excited about, so don't go anywhere. Right after we'll dive in. If I could just take a quick 60 seconds of your time, I wanted to introduce our newest Whiteboard Medicine emergency and critical care community, and that is our Patreon community. Here we post emergency and critical care medicine medical education topics every other day. We focus on landmark trials, new trials, clinical pearls, bedside tips and tricks, and much more. Everything emergency and critical care. We also upload study guides for each video. We have practice tests, and our newest addition is going to be mini courses that kind of lay out video study guides, practice questions into an easily digestible form that we hope is very applicable and helpful to the bedside. Our goal is to try to get even 1% of our YouTube community to join our Patreon community. It would be incredibly helpful in allowing us to spend more time creating content and elevating our current content. We appreciate you all, and we hope to see many of you there. All right, thanks for sticking around. So anaphylactic shock is, most you probably know, a severe, life-threatening systemic hypersensitivity reaction. And it's within the umbrella of distributive shock. So as we've talked about a whole bunch of times, there's kind of four types of shock. These are silos that we put different subtypes of shock under, although all of them act slightly different. But the first one that we talk about is distributive shock. This is like septic shock, neurogenic shock, anaphylactic shock, endocrinopathies. There's hypovolemic shock. This is like hemorrhage. There's cardiogenic shock. This could be from large myocardial infarctions or valvulopathies or heart failure, arrhythmias. And there's obstructive shock from things like pulmonary embolism, tension pneumothorax, cardiac tamponade. So within the distributive shock silo or umbrella, there's anaphylaxis, all right? So anaphylaxis often causes massive vasodilation, increased vascular permeability. This is kind of those leaky capillaries where intravascular volume leaks out into the soft tissues, the interstitial space, and then it can cause airway compromise too. The mechanism of action here is IgE-mediated mast cell degranulation. So you have all these mast cells, circulating around. They got nuclei, and they're just full of inflammatory granules. Well, when IgE can prompt these mast cells, IgE is an immunoglobulin E. It can prompt these mast cells to degranulate all these inflammatory mediators, histamine, tryptase, leukotrienes, prostaglandin, cytokines. And these inflammatory mediators then go and cause these things: massive vasodilation, increased vascular permeability, airway compromise, and they lead to all these systemic reactions. Okay, so it's kind of an allergic reaction in that sense. The hallmarks of this are often hypotension from the vasodilation and the third spacing. You can get airway compromise from bronchospasm or edema. Cutaneous symptoms like urticaria and angioedema are some of the hallmarks. You can also get GI symptoms, which is one of the more overlooked symptomatology of anaphylaxis, but we'll get more into all that as this discussion goes on. All right, classic presentation as we started to kind of tickle the surface of. So the onset is sudden, typically minutes after the allergen exposure. So you have a peanut allergy, right? You get exposed to peanuts and you develop in minutes an anaphylactic allergy, okay? Triggers can be anything, often food, like peanuts and shellfish, some medications, insect stings, latex. Any allergen can prompt an anaphylactic allergy in certain people. Okay, the clinical triad that we talked about already is respiratory symptoms, cardiovascular symptoms, and cutaneous symptoms. So respiratory symptoms can be shortness of breath, wheezing, stridor, which is that upper airway sound, throat tightness from swelling, angioedema, Cardiovascular, hypotension, tachycardia, vasodilation, distributive shock type pictures. Cutaneous, urticaria, which is that kind of raised skin rash that itches, flushing. And then angioedema. Anaphylaxis with angioedema can be a really, really scary thing, right? Angioedema is swelling of the lips and tongue and throat. So patients who are anaphylactic, they're hypotensive, they're tachycardic, they're covered in urticaria, and then they have swelling of their lips and tongue. That can be a really deadly scenario because some of those patients are hard to intubate. They're sometimes hard to get a breathing tube in. And if they don't respond to the immediate treatment, they get worse. That's a really, really dangerous situation. Other features here beyond the clinical triad, which is really important to not forget, is the GI symptoms. Abdominal cramping, vomiting, diarrhea, because GI symptoms, again, are part of that anaphylactic collection. Okay, pathophysiology here to dive into it a little deeper. The primary defect is the widespread release of all these vasoactive mediators. Remember, those are all those Mast and basophil cell granules that can get released into the systemic circulation. Those prostaglandins and histamines and leukotrienes and cytokines. So those get released into the systemic circulation, and they lead to profound vasodilation or a low systemic vascular resistance, low SVR state. Right? These are all synonyms: vasodilation, low SVR. You also get that increased capillary permeability, kind of those leaky capillaries. So some of your intravascular volume leaks out into the interstitial space, which leads to a relative hypovolemia. And then you can get bronchoconstriction, right? All these kind of upper airway and lower airway symptoms. So if we try to break down the key mechanisms and we just think about the granules being released, histamine, leukotriene, prostaglandin, and cytokines. Histamine leads to some of that vasodilation, increased capillary permeability. Leukotrienes can lead to bronchospasm. Prostaglandins can lead to hypotension and flushing. Cytokines amplify the reaction of those other ones, okay? So we kind of can tie some of the symptoms to some of these mediators being released. And the hemodynamic result of all this can be catastrophic, right? Decreased preload from leaky capillaries, massive vasodilation from decreased SVR, a drop in your mean arterial pressure. You usually get an increase in your cardiac output early because it's trying to compensate, but after a while you can get that high output heart failure, so it falls later on, which can lead to worsening hypotension. Okay, so this is kind of that spiral of circulatory collapse that can happen in anaphylactic shock if it's not aggressively treated early on. So from a testing standpoint, we always put this little table for hemodynamic parameters. So we have parameter and then whether it's high or low in anaphylactic shock. But remember, this is, patients don't always abide by these kind of classical things, but good for test questions. So the mean arterial pressure, again, you can be in shock with a normal mean arterial pressure, but for the sake of the test, your MAP is going to be low, right? Because you're in shock, you're hypotensive. Cardiac output in anaphylactic shock early on, as we said, you're actually going to be hyperdynamic. It's going to be high. Your contractility is going to be high. It's going to be kind of pounding away to try to perfuse. But after a while, it's going to drop in those late phases because you get that high output heart failure. Your systemic vascular resistance, your SVR, right? It's going to be markedly low. You're going to be vasodilated. This is one of the hallmarks of anaphylactic shock. Your CVP, or central venous pressure, is often low because you kind of have that quote-unquote relative hypovolemia from all the leaky capillaries where your intravascular volume is leaking out of the blood vessels into that interstitial space. And oxygen consumption is more complex. We're not going to talk about it in this episode. Okay, so low MAP, high cardiac output early that then turns into late decreased cardiac output late. You're going to have marked vasodilation with decreased SVR and a low CVP from all that capillary leak. All right, so those are some kind of the test question classical findings. So differentiating features between anaphylactic shock and either septic or neurogenic, these are both two other types of distributive shock along with anaphylaxis. So compared to septic shock, anaphylactic shock and septic shock, they both have a low SVR, a low systemic vascular resistance, a vasodilated state. But anaphylaxis is often very sudden in onset and usually will have respiratory compromise as well as skin findings, urticaria or angioedema. Okay, so that's much more characteristic of anaphylactic shock. Comparing anaphylactic shock to neurogenic shock, both can have warm extremities and hypotension, but neurogenic shock is often bradycardic, while anaphylaxis is almost always tachycardic. And again, you usually have airway involvement and skin findings in anaphylactic shock. So although there's some overlap, and anaphylaxis can be sometimes tricky to diagnose, you don't often mistake it for neurogenic shock. And, it's not typical to mistake it for septic shock, although that one's a little tougher. Management principles for anaphylaxis is key. So assess the airway thoroughly. You have to be very cognizant of patients with angioedema or that tongue and lip swelling. Do they have impending obstruction? Do you need to intubate them to protect their airway? So early intubation of unstable airway, and anticipate it being a difficult intubation because that supraglottic space, you can have a lot of swelling. It can be very hard to pass a tube. You might have to do a nasotracheal intubation if that tongue and lips are too swollen. Okay. Circulation, the treatment here, the first line treatment, and this is critical, diagnose this early, give this early, intramuscular epinephrine. Okay. So into the outer thigh, you can repeat it Q5 to 15 minutes. You can give more than one dose, and then fluids, obviously give them, but the treatment here is intramuscular epinephrine. That is what saves lives. Adjunctive medications, I put a question mark here because do these work that well? Unclear. But we'll usually give them dual histamine blockers, H1 and H2 blockers, with the thought being there's maybe some symptom control. Some folks think steroids prevent a biphasic reaction, right? Anaphylaxis can get better and then get worse again, so it can recur. This is the biphasic reaction 1, reaction 2. And there's some thought that steroids decrease the incidence of the biphasic reaction, but that's not totally well teased out in the literature. And then albuterol for bronchospasm. Certainly. None of this is intended to be acted upon as medical advice, as always. The full disclaimer is at the end. But our practice pattern, we tend to give steroids, although we don't know if we believe that they work that well. Dual H2 blockers probably are helpful for urticaria, for that itching, those itching symptoms, but we're not totally sure they do much otherwise. But again, look at the literature, decide what you want to do, and it's fairly classic to do all these things, dual H2 blocker, steroids, and beta agonists, as well as your intramuscular epinephrine. The takeaway, though, would be these adjunctive medications should never take priority over intramuscular epinephrine. If there is refractory shock, you've given IM epi a time or two, there's still fluid anaphylaxis, you might have to start them on an intravenous epinephrine infusion. Okay, so that's kind of the next line of therapy. And if there's still persistent hypotension despite that, sometimes norepinephrine, vasopressin, people even talk about, although we don't do this, things like methylene blue for these patients with refractory hypotension in the setting of anaphylaxis despite epinephrine infusion. So if they start to get better, we still tend to observe them, but remember, there's a risk of biphasic reactions, and these reactions can sometimes come on many, many hours later, so patients should always be counseled that that's possible, even if their symptoms do get better. All right, here's just some kind of guideline stuff, because we're nerds and we like putting a little guideline stuff in here just if you want to digest it. Epinephrine is the only first-line treatment for anaphylaxis. Antihistamines and steroids are simply supportive. Early IM epinephrine saves lives. Fluids can be helpful. Diagnostic criteria for anaphylaxis is acute onset and then skin involvement, airway, breathing, circulation, or GI, okay? So again, just some stuff to ponder. Okay. We're getting towards the end. Practice question time. Those of you who have not been part of our practice questions before, we usually have 3 questions, a beginner, intermediate, and advanced. We'll read the question stem, read the answer options, and then we'll go right into the answer. So if you need more time to think about the question, just make sure to pause the episode because we're just going to jump right into the answer. So beginner, a 25-year-old woman develops hypotension, urticaria, and wheezing minutes after eating peanuts. What is the first line treatment? A, fluids. B, diphenhydramine. C, intramuscular epinephrine. Or D, intravenous corticosteroids. Pause here if you need time. But hopefully this one is some low-hanging fruit. Correct answer is C, intramuscular epinephrine. So the first thing we want you to do is diagnose this patient with anaphylaxis, okay? They have a trigger. Where was it? Peanuts, okay? And then they have skin findings, respiratory findings, and cardiac findings, right? So this is anaphylaxis. So after you've figured out the diagnosis of anaphylaxis, you have to go with what is the treatment, and the treatment is intramuscular epinephrine times, that is the absolute first treatment. Can you give fluids? Yeah, but is the first line treatment? No. Can you give Benadryl? Yeah, but is the first line treatment? No. Can you give steroids? Yeah, but is the first line treatment? No. Intramuscular epinephrine saves lives. Okay, question 2, intermediate. A patient with anaphylaxis remains hypotensive despite intramuscular epinephrine times 2. Which medication is most appropriate? A, norepinephrine, B, intravenous epinephrine, C, atropine, or D, vasopressin. Pause here if you need to. The correct answer is B, intravenous epinephrine. So this is our practice pattern. Again, not medical advice, but we give 2 doses of intramuscular epinephrine, and if it's still refractory, you put them on an intravenous epinephrine infusion. Okay, you can use norepinephrine, but that is not the next step. The next step is an intravenous epinephrine infusion. Atropine's not going to help you. Vasopressin, again, is just another vasopressor. So key here is epi, okay? Question 3 and the last question. Which of the following best explains the hemodynamic profile of anaphylactic shock? A, decreased cardiac output, increased CVP, increased SVR. B, increased cardiac output early, decreased SVR, decreased CVP. C, decreased cardiac output, decreased SVR, increased CVP, or D, normal cardiac output, normal SVR, increased CVP. You might need to pause it because obviously we went through those quick, but the correct answer here is answer C. So you get an increased cardiac output early, right? Because your heart is just contracting away to try to perfuse. You have a decreased systemic vascular resistance, right? So much vasodilation. That's one of the hallmarks. And you have a decreased CVP because you're so vasodilated and you have those leaky capillaries that leads to hypovolemia, that your central venous pressure, your CVP, your right atrial pressure is going to be low. All right. So correct answer is B. This episode is a little short and sweet. We have talked in detail about anaphylaxis. Just search Whiteboard Medicine Anaphylaxis. That's a separate video or a separate episode. This one in particular was just focusing on anaphylactic shock itself. So if you want a deeper dive on anaphylaxis, just find that on our page. It's a good one. It's a deep dive. I think it's like 45 minutes long or something like that. Nonetheless, let us know what thoughts, comments, or questions you have down below. We'd love for you to check out our Patreon page. We're very active on there. YouTube members page, or if you prefer podcasts, we have this in podcast form, published on all the major podcast platforms. So yeah, check those out if you want. We'd love to have you. We're trying to build kind of a little community here, which has been great, been very rewarding. Either way, as we always say, stay well, keep learning. We hope to see you next time. Hey everybody, and welcome to Whiteboard Medicine. We appreciate you checking out the video. Here at Whiteboard Medicine, our goal is to create medical education content for all types of interested learners. That includes videos, practice questions, study resources, and much more. We would love for you to join our community by subscribing, hit that bell button. We're also working to build a high-yield Patreon page. It's going to be full of practice questions, video outlines, notes, commercial-free content, and much more.
None of these videos are intended to be acted upon as medical advice. Please pause the video here and read this disclaimer in its entirety before moving on.